Right? And I'm not playing no games. Yeah.
I can't believe this movie turned 30. I am so excited to talk about it. I'm here with two great guests to talk about it. Dean Krantz, who I've never had on a channel. I don't know how much he's been on other people's channels. I am so thrilled that he's here to bring his expertise. And Troy Pacelli is back with me, a total guru in history, military. I mean, he is just loves to dive deep into these kinds of topics. So, of course, I had to have Troy back with me to talk about A Few Good Men. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for being with me and hanging out. I hope you're doing well.
Howdy.
So, Dean, have you been on a lot of other people's channels?
I've been on a guest with Loki during his milestone celebrations, but for a few minutes at a time. I think I did one stream from beginning to end with him.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, it is great to be with you guys. This movie was fun to revisit today. I try to watch it. I usually try to watch it twice, but I had technical issues. I have technical issues in nearly every aspect of my life right now. It's really funny how the cards will stack against you when you're but yeah, 30 years kind of hit me in the feels. It was really rough thinking about 30 years. So that was rough. But yeah, it was fun diving into a little bit of the film's legacy, seeing the faces. Yeah, it was a good experience. I'm glad we decided to do this. The actual official anniversary date, I believe, is tomorrow. So, tomorrow is actually the 9th. That's actually the 30th anniversary. Is actually tomorrow. So, but here they come. Everybody's hopping in here. So, Krampus Jeebus, hey there, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us. DJ Ronnie G. All right. So for a moment, I thought I saw Polly from Latino Slant. He's got the hat. He's got the facial hair. Just the ethnicity might be a little bit off, but that's all right. So, so first off, gentlemen, let's talk about your first impression, like when you first saw the film or anything like that. I mean, obviously, we're old enough that we probably saw it in the theaters. I know I saw it in the theater. Did you guys see this in the theater? Do you have sort of like a first memory of a film like this? Dean, you go first, buddy.
My first memory of it is when this came out, I was less than 6 months out of the Marines. And all I could remember saying was, there's no such thing as a code red.
Blanket party, maybe?
Yeah, blanket party. And
there you go.
All I could think was, yeah, that just wouldn't work in Hollywood. Yeah. And the other thing I noticed was that the drill team during the opening sequence was not using M1 Garands. They were using 03 Springfields. And I was like, where did they find those? Because I've never seen a Marine drill team use them. So I'm wondering if maybe they got a college drill team or something like that to do it with demonstration rifles.
Because of reasons, I didn't have a chance to dive deep into every aspect, but I did read a little bit about how the military was not interested in helping them with this production, like at all. So part of the problem that they had in the development was maybe some of those details or acquiring the right kinds of things they needed, they weren't getting any help in that area. So I'm not trying to make excuses for Hollywood. They did get no excuses for me. However, I can see that being a bigger problem in 1992 than it would be even today, where you can go on the internet, you could do different things. So I don't know. What about you, Troy? What's your first experience taking in the Few Good Men experience?
I don't remember who all I saw it with. Yeah, I did go to see it at the cinema. Saw it with some friends. I just, like I said, can't remember who. And I love this movie. And honestly, I did not know when I first saw it in 92 that it was actually based on an Aaron Sorkin play from 89. You know, because I never saw a stage production of this. So I would, if I had more time to dig into it, I'd love to find out, you know, what's the difference between stage and screen on this one, and what kind of research, you know, went into this, because as you said, doesn't sound like they had, you know.
Well, I know a little bit. I know a little.
Oh, good.
So here's one of the big. So this actually, the reason I know this is because there's a great funny story that comes with it. I'll do my best to paraphrase, but first let me say hi to Nighthawk. Thank you for being here, my friend. There's a great funny story that comes with this. But yeah, Aaron Sorkin, he wrote a play. That's how I got picked up. Worked on the screenplay. He got part of the idea, or at least I don't know exactly the percentage of the idea, but a large part of the idea comes from his sister, who was a JAG. So she's actually a JAG, and the story is rooted in a real, I'm going to call it a hazing death. I don't remember the exact details, and I didn't have time to double check some of the minutia of the actual story that had actually happened. But she is a JAG, and in a hazing death, some of those elements are actually was sort of the origins and the birth of it all. The funny story that I'll never forget was, this is one of those Hollywood meddling legends that turned out to be true. So notes from the studio, unnamed executive, because Aaron Sorkin still wants to get paid, writes, unnamed executive sends me a note and says, if Demi Moore is not going to sleep with Tom Cruise, why is this character a woman? Whoa. His response, ready? His response is, well, women tend to be able to do more things than just sleep with Tom Cruise.
There you go.
Good for him.
Aaron Sorkin is a goat. Like, he's a goat. Like, he's uncancelable. You know, David Mamet is another one. If you haven't read David Mamet books, let me tell you what, it is gold. Oh, Troy, you should own every David Mamet book. Troy, you will love David Mamet books.
I own just about every one of his plays that's been turned into film, on DVD.
The stories he tells, the interviews that he goes. Oh yeah, so Aaron Sorkin may not be a David Mamet,
no,
but he has that sort of go F yourself money and attitude and what I've done it. He's gonna have royalties on some of these plays and stuff he's done for the rest of his life. He early on made it. So this story has some elements of truth, but I don't want to, let's not get carried away. And I agree with Dean. There's probably, and it's another reason why, Dean, I'm glad you were able to be with us too, because you're able to pick up on those things. I would not. I'm too much of a noob. I come from a military family, but I wasn't able to serve, so you would know some of those ins and outs as a Marine. So I'm glad that you could bring that to this conversation. Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
So let's talk about that opening, right? So we have the brief death scene, which I think is edited pretty well, and then you cut right to this whole lead up of how to get counsel. The two guys are being held on murder charges, and then it starts to kind of play out where we're going to have it. We kind of understand more as the movie goes on. Early on, you don't quite, at least you're not supposed to kind of pick up on why Tom Cruise's character is being picked, but Kaffee is more interested in it's almost like a frat party for him. He's playing this, he's coaching the softball team. It's a baseball nut. And, he's interested in trying to figure out how to plea bargain every case, not actually have to be in the courtroom. He's a great legal mind, but he's not interested in trial law. And Demi Moore plays more of like the idealist as Galloway, and we're immediately at odds with one another. I don't know, what was your impression, Troy, as you kind of rewatched this and in the sort of that lead up of the introduction of these characters and some of that stuff before we end up going to Cuba?
Yeah, so I didn't serve myself, even though I'm reasonably well read, and see, that was part of the reason I was a little surprised she asked me on here, because this is also not a truly historic one. So it's not like, historically what actually happened. Well, no, this is pretty much a work of fiction. But what I really don't know is the differences between the way the legal system works in the Judge Advocate General's office, and as opposed to the differences to the private sector, right? My cousin Vinny, that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. I assume it's pretty similar, but I could totally see someone like, but in the military this happens, so I was kind of a little nervous about that.
A court-martial is there. How do I put this? A court-martial and a trial are only share names, really. Unless it's a capital offense, right? But for something like this, where there was hazing involved, and unfortunately there was a death.
Yep.
But that really doesn't change it. There would still be more than one judge on the panel, right?
You not only that, one thing that kind of stood out to me as I was, and I don't want to jump ahead, but when you get to the courtroom stuff, there's some stuff that happens there that I'm like, that's something I think an attorney would do for, if there was a jury. You don't do that when there's a judge,
Yeah.
You might throw out the question will be objected to because you want to get it in front of the jury. You don't do that on a bench trial.
Yeah, I like not have basically trying to U.S. versus the guilty is a great way to and really this is a Rob Reiner film, so he has an agenda with why he would want to adapt this with a certain type of tone and a certain type of feel. So I wanted to say, Dean, let me get your thoughts, because when I rewatched this today, one thing that struck me, because we were talking about 92, so we're talking about a very young-looking Tom Cruise, a very pretty, still young and vibrant Demi Moore, and Kevin Bacon, and even Kiefer Sutherland. You're seeing a group of people who were cast because they're pretty. Mm-hmm. And I did not feel like there was an ounce of gravitas as characters, really. Like, I felt I was okay to go along for the ride, but as I watched it, I gotta be honest, like, only Kevin Pollak kind of was believable. I hate to kind of say it that way, but I'm not trying to diss performances, but just as far as casting goes,
I'll say this: of the people you mentioned, I'll give Kiefer Sutherland props because he reminded me of every salty butter bar lieutenant I ever met. Right? He had all the answers. There's nothing you can teach me, and he was probably platoon sergeant's worst nightmare because he struck me as one of those officers that would micromanage a platoon, and rather than letting his staff, his platoon sergeant, his staff sergeant, do his job or maintain discipline among his squad and fire team leaders, he was in there messing with everything. And a lot of officers will say, don't do that. Don't get messed up in the weeds, and this is a great thing where you get to see the absolute worst quality in an officer through Kiefer Sutherland, in that you never see anybody in that movie that's above the rank of corporal. Right. Everyone else that was there, it goes from you've got a lance corporal who's a fire team leader, and then you got a couple of PFCs. Was it Noah Wiley was a lance corporal who appeared on the stand, but other than Kiefer Sutherland as the platoon commander and Jack Nicholson as the barracks commander, you don't see anyone other than lance corporals, PFCs, and officers. So yeah, it was in that way, it accomplished something that not a lot of people see, but it's a failure in leadership. And
Nighthawk brings up the fact that he actually had in the Navy had escorted people back and forth for court-martial hearings every day, every Friday. Wow, that's
you got stuck on chaser duty. Oh man,
that can be a bad beat. Ooh. The only correction I'd make to that, Dean, is we did have a lieutenant colonel, right? Isn't that Markinson?
Oh, the major. The major.
Is he a major? I thought he was.
Was he? Okay. No. You're right. He was a lieutenant colonel.
I think he's a lieutenant colonel. I think he's J.T. Walsh's character, right? The one that disappears, and then ultimately he's
you're right there, and again, that's a failure in leadership as well, because a good commander, which is what they were trying to paint Nicholson as, leans on his XO. The few times you see those two interact, you see, I'm sorry, what was J.T. Walsh, or what was his name?
J.T. Walsh is the actor that plays that character. Markinson is the actual character name.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you see Markinson suggesting that they just get the deceased private out of the battalion, and Nicholson's character is like, no, this would be a failure of leadership on my part. No, when you got somebody who's clearly, that bad at being a Marine, you wash them out.
I wondered how much of this, because the way they play the Nicholson's character is, it's all gone to his head, right? He's going to Washington. He's getting this big gig and all that. It's just the arrogance and all of that. I wonder how much of this is kind of or supposed to be a dig at like the Bush administration, right? The H.W. Bush administration. This came out in 92. So, how Hollywood likes to try to have their jabs in there. They think they're clever. They think they're smart. I don't remember. I was very apolitical during that time frame of my life in college and stuff. So I wouldn't even necessarily have connected those dots much, but I could see them thinking they're clever, thinking they're painting military in bad light and all of that, whenever in fact I don't know that it comes across that way, other than just being a bad guy, not a bad military. So
I would say don't try to put yourself in the meathead's head. You don't want to be there.
Yeah. That's always good advice, especially when it comes to the Hollywood people. So I love the chemistry in the opening. I love how it progresses pretty well in that lead up to Cuba, where you're trying to get a feel for how they're all going to interact and the back and forth. And I think Tom Cruise and Demi Moore had okay chemistry for how they played it up pretty well. The Cuba stuff I thought was there's a couple of things that I thought was odd. It was weird that they threw in that Tom Cruise's character doesn't like to fly, doesn't like to be on a boat. And I'm like, I don't remember that, but I mean, like, you're really, really wussifying the guy. It was just a strange
not to
thing
mention
that
if you
jumped
go
out
into
at
the
me
Navy.
on my rewatch.
I don't want to be on a boat, but I'm
in the
going to be in the
movie.
Navy.
That was the joke in the movie, but I thought to myself, but it was also the plane. Like, he's afraid of almost everything that's relevant to his job. Like, okay.
Well, there's a derogatory name we had for people that were not in direct combat units, and that was Pogue, person other than grunt, right? And they are always portrayed as, the bookish guy, not necessarily the strongest, the alpha male. These were the guys that you would, you'd kind of laugh. They're the Marines with the specs sitting behind a typewriter.
The guys who look like me. I got you. It's okay, Dean. We can say it. Say the guys look like me. When we bought the farm, all my kids had these jokes about they can't wait to see me out there shoveling animal poo and doing what needed to be done, even though they don't understand when you're as old as we are. We did this when we were kids, so we're not even remotely fazed by it.
Pops, I've been wearing glasses since I was 3 years old, so you got nothing on me. But but I've also been strong, so I was like, so what they do, they're like, hey, here's a radio, Krantz. All right, thanks. Gee, But so the joke is that the office types are not necessarily the meat eaters, right? And so they tried to put that with Tom Cruise. It's like, if he had the guts to be a pilot, he'd love to fly. If you want, it's like, where does every naval officer want to be? Well, if I'm not I want to be on sea duty. Tom Cruise was like, I just want to stick around naval headquarters in Washington until my time as a naval officer is done, and then I can go into practice. And that was kind of the way his character went. There was nothing about Cruise's character that screamed career naval man. What he was just checking a box on his way towards partnership at a law firm.
And I'm glad there was a couple of lines that point that out. I wish they had used the derogatory term that you mentioned. I wish they had that kind of like language in there that would have made it feel more authentic for me. That's kind of missing. And Chi, I thank you so much for that recommendation. I'm not personally going to share anything tonight, so maybe we'll look at Troy to doing that at the end if we have time. Look at a list of articles like that, 'cause that's always kind of fun where you can find some new interesting things. There is, by the way, if you Google some of these interviews, and I really can't remember, but I'm like 90% sure it was a Kevin Pollak interview talking about the Nicholson speech and them reshooting it and how it was done and things like that. It was really fascinating, but I didn't have a chance to revisit it, and it's not solid enough in this mush that's up here in my brain to get into the weeds with it. So once we go to Cuba, the film really gets its wheels for me. Like, I love the fact that you see Cruz is just basically like nonchalantly walking around. Demi's like not listening. And then when you get to that lunch, the firebrand lunch is fantastic, because that's when you really see, you know, the Joker version of Nicholson as Jessup. Boy, you see the dark side of Nicholson's performing, and it's amazing. Dean, when you rewatch this, did that still sort of cut you? Because it cut me. I was like, ooh, this guy, oh God, he's tough.
God, how do I put that? You know, like I know the 24-year-old me that watched it back in '92 was like, yeah, way to go. Now the 55-year-old man who watches this is like, yeah, dude, you're just being condescending and rude. All right, you know, and he's a colonel in the United States Marine Corps, right? And that's one of the reasons I started to dislike that guy immediately. Is you don't welcome guests into your command and then immediately insult them. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether or not you respect them. They're still members of the United States military. And him sitting there, you know, like he points out to Cruz's character, and immediately talks about all the milestones that his father had made, and then he just kind of does a little dig, like, it's hard, tough act to follow, and it's like, basically saying that, I know why you're here. Yeah.
Right. Cannoli, you can just poop on here anytime you like, my friend. That's the best typo ever, by the way. Troy, what's your thoughts in that scene and that sort of, because basically there's a little bit of an introduction to Nicholson's character in the other sequence, but this is the one where you really get to know the Jessup that you're going to be faced with later on in the movie.
My biggest problem and it's one of those things, it needles me every time I see the movie. He's there. Yeah, I get it. It's a Hollywood thing. They're trying to show him as the cocky villain character, right? Who thinks he's above the law and everything. Nobody is so cocky that they would take that meeting without a lawyer present. He has no lawyer there.
That's an interesting angle. I don't think I even thought about that today. That's a good point.
And every time I see it, I'm like, yeah.
And I'm kind of with both of you in different ways. Like, I totally agree with Dean. Like, why? As I watched it today, obviously when you've seen the film, the cat's out of the bag. You kind of understand the character. You understand the story arc for the character. But when you're watching it, I try to be as cold as I can approaching it. And I thought to myself, why being such a douchebag? Like, why are you being this way? And then, as you say, like, there's no counsel. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, why would you show all your cards? What I didn't like was actually just a little bit of the follow-up after, because obviously it provokes Demi Moore's character first, and she's basically just, spewing up nonsense and asking him questions. Yeah. I guess I had forgotten, but what I expected to have happen in my little cold brain, trying to see it for the first time again, was Tom's. By the way, they're their real names to me. They never ever become their character's name. I know it's Holloway and Kaffee. It's just Demi and Tom. I just can't get their character names to stick for me, which is part of the problem with this film too. Yeah. That he didn't lecture her, that the real problem was she showed her cards. These are the questions that we would ask. This is the strategy they would have. Why would you tip him off at the direction that we would go, or something like that? Like, I know that's almost oversimplified, but I think for the audience it would have been a better portrayal of their conflict, and then that they kind of have to work together better. But it's fine. It was okay.
You almost have to take yourself out of the real world analysis of it and look at more of the story craft of it. So, for example, the cockiness of Jessup in this scene, and the condescension, and they have to ask me nicely, The reason that's important and needs to be there is because it literally is the seed that blooms when your GD right, I did,
He explodes at the end. Yeah. I got it. Yeah.
And by the same token, you got, Holloway and Kaffee who are they're like you said, they're young. They are young. They are inexperienced, especially Tom Cruise here, right? He has no idea what he's getting into. And a light goes on for him at this moment. We need to see that light go on. It's maybe a little ham-fisted the way they did it, but yeah, the nature of storytelling.
Yeah. So that gets us pretty far into the film. Actually, it seems like it's it's like a couple things we've only talked about, but the script is pretty tight. It's a little over 2 hours. I think there's probably a good 10 minutes or so that I might lose, but it's not a big issue with the film. It moves along pretty well. I got to be honest, as I rewatched it today, one thing that popped on my head with the Markinson's character, I almost felt like the script didn't know what to do with this character. They got through the character. They got through the script. It got pitched, it got bought, and they're headed into production. And then someone asked the question, but why would Jessup be the problem? Why would Markinson be the fall guy? So we had to come up with a solution to take him out of the mix and then have him delete himself so that we could make sure that it would only fall on the one shoulder and not the other guy. So I know lots of spoilers again, guys, if you haven't watched this movie, but I definitely recommend. You really can't spoil a movie like this because you're watching it for the dramatic presentation of it, because it was written as a play first. So that definitely still conveys. Like, it doesn't really age. It's just as much as, I mean, other than you kind of know what's coming, it's just as much the same kind of experience every time you watch it. I don't know. Am I way off base with some of those kinds of thoughts, guys? I mean, someone of you help me out here. I don't know.
Well, and I'll say this, right? When something goes wrong in the military, when things go wrong, shit rolls uphill. And it doesn't matter, who did the bad thing. It ultimately rests on the shoulders of the commanding officer, whether that be a platoon commander, company commander, battalion commander. If it's egregious enough and it was known, it was widely known that this was happening, why did you not address this? Right? And that's the point of this, where if you're talking about why didn't this happen to the, Markinson's character, well, it doesn't matter. He's the executive officer, right? And it's pretty, we learned through the course of the movie that he was just kind of cut out, right? So at that point, if it's going on, and I don't know if I should be bringing this up, but if it's going on between Jessup and Kiefer Sutherland's character, where there were probably several, at least two more layers of leadership between those two. If it's if he's avoiding his executive officer and the company commander to go talk to a lieutenant, then it is his responsibility, and so to that question, why would they go after Markinson? And you see it. He's. Go ahead.
Let me ask a follow-up question, Dean. Before you jump in, let me ask a follow-up question though. Would it be something that would happen where, because he lectures the XO, like, hey, listen, don't contradict me, don't do that in front of me, in front of another officer, don't do that. But then he has no problem going to another officer under the XO. Like, is that sort of like circumventing and hypocrisy of the chain of command something that happens? Because it seemed like that also felt like, is that something that they would do? It seemed like it would always be one respected chain of command, and that it would work in both ways, or is it just a reflection of him being a bad leader?
There are times when a good leader will step in, right? But he also knows that it's got to be really, really a bad situation for that to happen. Now, God, losing my chain of thought here, so bear with me. What he did as far as circumventing all the other officers in the chain of command, Could a colonel do that? Yes. Should he do it? No. And that's one of the things they always taught me in a leadership position is there are orders that you can give and there are orders that you should give. Right? And the big thing is to know which one to do. And
so fair enough. Well, let me get to Troy, but first let's say Chi is pointing out the screenplay is online. Actually, there's a lot of screenplays you can find online, especially from our Nexus era of stuff that we love from like the 70s through the 2000s. You can definitely find a lot of the screenplays, even if they're early drafts. Do that. And hail to another YouTuber rock star, man. Greedo Espedo is like a great crazy escape. Like I just an unhinged crazy stuff. He's in that category for me. They do stuff. So all right, Troy, speak a little bit to that.
Well, first I got to say that screen name brings up a mental image. Greedo and a Speedo. I just
if you haven't been to the channel,
I'll check it out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's also
you got a sub coming, Greedo, no doubt about it.
Salacious Rum is another one. Just the craziness that will happen, and they will do things that I admire and respect so much. It's like because I think there's some people that will try to pin a creator down, like this is what you do, don't do things, and they'll have a live stream where they do this. They'll do a Lego thing. They'll be doing toys. They're just nerds talking nerd stuff. Just do what you like to do, and I love it. They're all authentic, cool dudes, man. I love it all. So, definitely check them out.
I subscribe to Salacious Rum too. But I'm glad you actually asked that question though, because that is one of the things I kind of struggle with. I have my limited knowledge of understanding of how the chain of command works. I know it, ideally should be pretty rigid, but I don't know that it, whether or not in practice it really is. You do see at the beginning, or they establish early on, because it's what establishes all the points of the story, is Santiago is sending these letters, jumping the chain of command. Right. Trying to get out of this company.
Yep.
And, one of them gets to Jessup, and he's like, who the heck is Santiago, right? And that's when he has this conversation, right? So we're already dealing with a jumping of the chain of command right then and there. But Dean, I certainly want your input on this, because I've talked to some other guys that have served that have said, the one thing I never understood is Jessup hears all this, he'd have been like, get him out of here. What are we even doing with him here?
And there's another thing that they don't bring up. And in the Navy and the Marine Corps, there is an action that you can take as lower down in the chain of command, which is called request mast. And what that is say I, as a sergeant, am every day getting up in the morning, going into some of my men's rooms, ostensibly inspecting and grabbing every scrap of money that's sitting out and saying, hey, this is the dickhead tax and it's mine now because you didn't secure it. Now, what are they going to do? Are they going to complain to me because I'm stealing? No, they're going to go to my, the platoon sergeant. If the platoon sergeant doesn't listen and the platoon commander doesn't listen, then they can go and request mast up the chain of command to address a situation like that. And
Greedo's in the same boat too. Was in the military when it came out. So I've seen it many times. Yeah, you're the same age bracket we are here, plus or minus a few years, my friend. So any thoughts you guys have in chat? Please let us know. Like, is a certain scene early on? We're not in the courtroom yet, so we're talking about the early character development. Talking about trips to Cuba, case development, infrastructure of chain of commands, and all the fact gathering. All that's kind of where we're at in the whole story. We're trying to stay, at least I say focused, but trying to keep it compartmentalized to talk about it. So go ahead, Troy.
And I think that's the weakest. This is probably the weakest point in the story, is that element of the why does Jessup want to, blanket party this kid and treat him this way? Why does he not just get him out of there? Because when he does start making the argument that, Santiago was subpar, he was a danger to all the people around him and stuff, he's not wrong, right? So the right thing to do would have been to get him out of there.
Put him on a desk job. That was my big takeaway. Again, it would be my response later on in the film when they're having this conversation, because at the end, this is actually the pivot point in the court case. But my thought process was immediately like, why did you not just pull the dude off into a desk job? You have medical documents. He's become a hazard. I don't think that is an open door for everyone to follow suit. You know what I mean? It's like I just don't. I mean, I understood the argument, but it seems like it was a very hyperbolic portrayal of a narcissist colonel instead of it being a good reflection of reality. It's not a good reflection of reality. Go ahead, Dean.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring up two things. First, when you're talking about that, what could they have done to get him out of the platoon? There are any number of things. They could have sent him to base special services, and he could have been in the gymnasium checking out volleyballs to people who wanted to go work out, and just get him out of the platoon, put him in a nothing job. Hey, here you go. Here's a set of nail clippers. Go trim the grass. Just and the other thing that isn't mentioned in the movie, but any Marine that's ever watched this is sworn up and down. All right. Guantanamo Bay is not a Marine infantry battalion. It's a Marine security battalion, right? Mm-hmm. And so they'll
prison center, basically.
Well, back then it wasn't. It was just it was a naval, it was a naval coaling station, and we don't have ships that use coal. But anyway, Marine security guard is considered plush duty, right? Even though it's Guantanamo Bay, arguably one of the worst places to be on barracks duty. But most guys that go on barracks duty, and what'll take, back then, you could be in the Marine Corps in the infantry for 8 years and still be a Lance Corporal. So guys coming off of a special duty like barracks duty or sea duty that would go down there and they'd pick up 2 extra ranks. So he could have been leaving there a corporal, having been there as a private. And
Gotcha.
And so it's considered special duty. They would have, if I'd been Jessup, I would have been like, oh, he thinks it's bad here? Have fun in an infantry battalion doing force marches every Friday. There you go. Right. So you're going to be missing this.
Yeah. Greedo, don't get ahead of us, though, bro. Totally. Trust me. There's part of me who wanted to do clips and stuff, because all these things you can do. Ask Troy. I enjoy face swaps and all sorts of crazy stuff. We were going to try to have some fun with it, but technical difficulties got in the way of my lack of editing abilities this last week and a half or so. All right, so let's move through the film a little bit further, where we start to get towards the setup and the preliminary elements of the trial. And it kind of, again, the pivot point is the 2 men that are accused of murder. One is sort of like a few notches above Forrest Gump, and the other one is basically got the Marine code of conduct that Jessup's group has drilled into his head, and that it is unbecoming to him to concede his honor by even pleading guilty or taking a plea bargain or anything like that. He's like, no, I'm not doing it. So, and he brings up a great line, by the way. And I will say the film for me didn't age as well as I thought it would, even though it's a great film. I'm not trying to make this film tanking it or anything like that, but it becomes more like an 8.5 to a 9 for me. It's not like it's not some, it's not like a 10 or anything like that for me. But it's like it kind of flows like this. But there's a great line where he said he kept pushing Tom Cruise's character, like, well, yeah, but then what? Like, yeah, you get me thrown out by serving 6 months and I'm dishonorable. Yeah, but then what? Then I'm just a dishonorably discharged Marine that goes back to the States, and I'm just a young kid who can't find a job, who doesn't do it. This is what I want to do. That was very poignant in the writing and in the story. And then when you get to the actual preliminary elements of the hearing, where you have Kevin Bacon's character, it's kind of like throwing the stuff out there a little bit. I actually liked all that. I thought Kevin Bacon kind of brought it pretty well in the courtroom elements, more than like, I'm playing basketball like lawyer. I all of that just to me didn't. I don't care. It was 6 1/2 dozen to another. But I thought Kevin Bacon, I think, tried to be a good portrayal of that prosecutor. I thought that stuff went pretty well. I don't know, Troy, what are you thinking about when that first phase in particular?
Yeah, I so when you go into a case like this, you and every attorney that you ever talk to, and I'm sure this is as true for the military as it is anywhere else, you have to be realistic about the law, but you also have to do what your client asks you to do. You work for your client. And, well, I mean, let's just say there was a recent defamation case between a couple of ex-married couple in Hollywood, and ask the attorneys involved there what it was like working for that particular individual, AH, and trying to tell AH, we really should. Okay, whatever you say.
Right. No, I agree. This hit home for me in a lot of ways, where you felt like Kevin Bacon's character going, all right, if that's what you want to do. And he is sort of like arrogantly marching out his witnesses, just laying it all out there. And Cruz's character is like, all right, we can see there's going to be like 27 more of these guys, Yeah. I thought all of that was fine. It gets us through this. We don't waste a whole bunch of time. It moves us there. There's a lot of other, I don't know, Dean, when you watch a lot of other courtroom dramas, doesn't it get tedious sometimes where it's like we can't get to the point? We can't get to the point. Few Good Men gets to the point. Like I know it's still. I think it could, but I don't think it wasted a lot of screen time to get us to Tom Cruise's part, which is the part that we all want to watch.
And I'll say this. You were bringing up Kevin Bacon's character, and I think that he is the mirror. The dark mirror for Cruz, if you want to put it, or Cruz is his dark mirror. Kevin Bacon is, I could see him, we did see him in Taking Chance, years down the road as a lieutenant colonel who had dedicated his life to the Marine Corps. I thought that was a pretty good casting case, and you see that in his character there. And what is he doing? Well, you got two Marines who, in a case of hazing, killed another Marine, right? And he's approaching it from that angle, and he's fixated on proving that point. And Cruz, on the other hand, and Demi Moore to a lesser extent, and that team, I love the later on the dynamic between Pollack and Demi Moore's character. But how did I see it? I really think that Kevin Bacon, in his role there, was, he had, if it was anybody but Cruz, he would have stolen the show.
Okay, that's a fair assessment there. Yeah, I can agree with you there, because I think he just, and I think that again, you have to understand what the Bacon character is doing. It's like, this is like a softball for me. I don't even know why we're here. I'm obviously going to prove my case. Like, he's just totally going through the motions. Like, I'm just going to keep coming at you. And then when you get to the Cruz part, and I will say this, let me ask your opinion, Troy. This is an odd film where the audience knows more than the characters in some way. Like, we know all of what's going to happen. Like, we know there's really a code red. We know it's almost like we're in on it, but now we get to go on the journey of watching how just how it's going to play out. I don't think there's like, to know some of the details is not really a twist. It's sort of like kind of spelled out for you, but it's like how it all is played. Like, again, it comes from an adapted play, right? It's about performance, but that is a nuance that seems like a lost art. And this film, I think this is one of its strengths, is that allowing these actors to just be the character, just be who you are, just be this character.
Right. And I think that Kevin Bacon is actually pretty much saying exactly that in this scene, right? He's saying this definitely happened, and Kaffee's saying, but there's some extenuating circumstances don't matter. This is what happened. This is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and one other thing I wanted to say about this conversation, I have heard people argue, well, these two lawyers shouldn't be talking like this. You know, this doesn't happen. Come to find out, you talk to a lot of lawyers will go, oh no, these kinds of conversations happen all the time. You know?
Absolutely. 100. I've been covering news for almost 20 years. My wife was we went to the Florida meetup, and it like hit her really hard on the drive there, and then having people ask me questions, and it's like, we have been doing this for 20 years. I said, yeah, next year is 20 years. And 2003 was my first sort of like side hustle gig. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's been a whirlwind of fringe benefits. And I've had people on and off the record talk about politicians having lunch together. I mean, all the way through. Oh. It is at every layer, judges, attorney. It's in all of it. Some things I can talk about, some things I won't publicly. But as someone who was literally like part of the day when Google News was actually Google News, I was one of those guys back in the day, like in the early, the mid 2000s in particular, from like 2008 to 2012. There was debate whether or not that would be my full-time job. Like we can really flip that switch. Like we really, if I wasn't relying on someone else writing the check, like if it was my act, you're paying me directly like we can now,
right? I
probably would have gone full-time.
Well, talking about strange relationships, right? And this is completely off base or off topic. I had again, Lieutenant Colonel. He was the air officer for my regiment, and he was an F-4 pilot in the 70s. And so when Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House, he was friends with a Republican congressman in the Southern California area, and he had missed his flight. There was just no flights going from San Diego to Washington, D.C. Tip O'Neill gets on the phone, calls the Secretary of Defense. Secretary of Defense calls the Secretary of the Navy, on down the chain of command. Long story short, this Lieutenant Colonel, who was a captain at the time, winds up having this congressman as the backseater in his F-4, flying Mach 2 from San Diego to Washington, D.C., so that he can make a vote.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And the guy...
I like Chief's comment, which is kind of what you're saying, too. It's like, not everyone gets to see how the Navy makes the gravy. Is that a shirt? That should be a shirt. That's pretty funny, Chi.
And kind of, an aside, the guy from Southern California was a Republican, Tip O'Neill being a Democrat. It was, they were buddies.
Troy and I did an entire election stream. I think we both agree, and our advice to most people that are completely noobs in all of this stuff is, you do realize they have way more in common with each other than they do us.
Oh, yeah.
If you can just get that in your head, you're at least on the right path to at least seeing things a little bit clear. The moment you think there's a lot of really good guys and a lot of really bad guys, you're really not seeing the picture as clearly as you need to. We need to adjust the lenses a little bit. So, okay, so now we get into the courtroom. We get into the defense. The defense becomes like a roller coaster ride. I felt it was very Hollywood contrived. I got to be honest, in my rewatch today, I just felt like things just kind of play out in a certain way. You're really trying to see Cruz keep advancing his skill set a little bit. Before I have my one opinion on it, though, let me give you, Troy, what are your thoughts on sort of like before, kind of like before we get to like Noah Wyle and stuff, like before that, you get to that first phase of like the courtroom stuff and things like that.
So I think all the way up to this point, you're looking at Cruz and saying this guy is way too cocky and way out of his depth. Mm-hmm. And he eventually gets to a point where he realizes that. Mm-hmm. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but he's got his humbling moment coming. Mm-hmm. And But at the same time, he's the one you're supposed to be rooting for, right? He's supposed to be your hero character, right? So you're kind of gripping your seat going, oh, man, get it together, man.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Especially when I can't remember, I think it's after this, but he has that moment where he just gets blotto. And it's like, but again, this is a very Hollywood way of conveying ideas, right? It may not be the most realistic way things would go in the real world, but that's okay. We're getting across a story, and sometimes that's where the real separation for me is. Suspending my disbelief and saying, yeah, they got the spirit right, so we'll go with it.
Okay, fair enough. Dean, you had a lot to praise to say for how Kiefer Sutherland's character came across. Now, of course, I think when he's on the stand is when it just becomes pristine. Like, this is the scene. Speak a little bit about what you thought on your rewatch of watching Kiefer's performance in this, because I think this was just, it may be Hollywood stereotypes or however they want to look at, Bible-thumping military people, but let me tell you what, Kiefer Sutherland brought it and delivered it in that scene on that. When he's on stand, it's just, to me, it's just gold.
Well, I have to say that, they wrote him like a caricature, but speaking as, it shows Kiefer Sutherland's ability to add depth to a character. This was a character that was originally written to be hated, and he did his job as the platoon commander. He comes across as just any junior officer who is at the beginning of his career, when you're faced down by, a colonel, and he says, do something this way, and then he internalized it, and it's like, you know what? The colonel said do this, I'll do that, and his character played it as if, if it hadn't been, being a platoon commander at Guantanamo Bay, it could have been platoon commander at Iwo Jima. The colonel said, storm that beach. I stormed that beach. This is what happened along the way, right. And that's exactly the way he delivered his testimony. Yeah.
I loved it so much. I didn't have time to kind of rewind and watch it again. I'm going to go through this film again, probably over Christmas break. To really just enjoy it again. Because like I said, I normally just take these things in 2 or 3 times, especially when you're trying to lock it in for an anniversary year like this or something like this. You know what I mean? And once I do a dive deep like this, I'm not sure I don't have a ton of interest of revisiting it, other than I'd rather go on Troy's stream and discuss it on his channel instead of putting more of it on mine. But that would be a scene that I would enjoy watching again. The one thing that kind of made me cringe a little, I again, for you in chat who are not real familiar, maybe you haven't heard me say this, I believe there is a thing about, I call it the 2020s PTSD. It's the woke PTSD. We have woke PTSD. There's a scene where Demi Moore, because it's in reverse in the 90s, and she said, she's basically giving him, oh, Tom, you're just amazeballs. You're just amazing. You're up there. Everyone just wants to look at you and blah, blah. And I thought to myself, boy, that sure has changed. I just kind of wow. Boy, that script sure has flipped. She's just on her knees talking about how great he is and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, yeah, this would be completely reversed if it was made in the last couple of years.
Probably so. I think the thing that stands out for me, especially with that Kiefer Sutherland speech, I agree with everything you said. But this is where one of those lines that I was talking about earlier, where he makes his point about the what is it, the military code of conduct and the King James Bible, right?
Yep.
Those are the only 2 authorities that he recognizes. So there's Colonel Nathan Jessup and Lord God Almighty, right? Those are the only 2 authorities. And then Kaffee says, I want the record to show that he does not acknowledge this court. And everybody in that court would be like, what the heck? Shut up. We know what he means.
Yeah.
This court falls under the military code of justice.
Yeah.
You're making a point for a jury that doesn't exist,
Yeah. Yeah, it was a weird. There's a couple of those weird moments that this film does have.
Yeah,
and I think
that
this
takes
is
me
where,
out of it.
And this is where the films that are when you go through the 80s and the 90s, movies like this tend to have these little just like 2 or 3 moments where you're like, ooh, I don't like that. It just didn't, Yeah. But I also think because we're in the weeds with liking this type of drama, we're in the weeds liking type of, military and history and these type of films. Like we like that kind of stuff. And yeah, you're right.
Hold the bar high.
This isn't a horse. Yeah, we're like, listen, button it up. Especially because again, I didn't mention this. I usually mention it early on, right? Nominated for 4 awards, four Oscars. Bupkis. Bad year, bad timing. Went up against Son of a Woman and went up against Unforgiven and got blanked because both of those elements had things that were far superior than this film. That's just sorry about reality. Yeah. I've covered Son of a Woman here recently, and Unforgiven is possibly, I think, the best modern Western that has been made. It's such a beautifully shot film and executed in every way. And while I love Nicholson's speech, I even like the fact that the lunch scene, as crazy as it was we talked about, doesn't really hold a candle to the dynamic nature of Gene Hackman's role in Unforgiven. So he lost. So,
well, I'll say this, and maybe you guys will shoot me down, but I call
conflict. Let's do it.
I call this era in Tom Cruise's life his quest for critical acclaim, because after Born on the 4th of July, he did this movie, and he kept searching for those critical roles that would put him in an Oscar campaign rather than doing a passion project. Or I should say, maybe this was a passion project for him. But it seemed like this and, what was it, Color of Money, which I enjoyed thoroughly. But these were films that Tom Cruise made to show he could do more than just be an action star.
That's interesting because he immediately, within a couple years, goes to Mission Impossible. So it is funny you see it that way, because he's already done Rain Man and Born on the 4th of July, and I totally see like he's trying to find ways to, I don't know, you know what, we would have to do a little bit of a digging to figure out who goes to who. Now, The Color of Money, they went to him because he was coming off of Top Gun, so that part I do remember. They went to him with that. So Top Gun and Color of Money come out basically the same time or the same year. Cocktail as well. He's just that big. Yeah. But what? I don't know. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
I not only agree with Dean, I'm going to take it one step further and say, and I never thought about it in this way before until he said it that way. Mm-hmm. I've always told people when it comes to these movies, I'm not particularly a Tom Cruise fan, but I like just about every movie he's been in, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He is in the movie, but I love the movie, right? But when you look at Rain Man, it's not about Tom Cruise, it's about Dustin Hoffman.
Correct.
When you watch this one, it's not about Tom Cruise, it's Jack Nicholson. I mean, it's Color of Money, it's Paul Newman. Yeah.
So
anyway,
is he an overrated actor then?
No. Well, if you asked me that then, I'd say yes.
Agreed.
I would, looking back now, I'd say, nah, he was young and getting experienced, right?
Fair enough.
Because now he's a very good actor.
Well, he's done a lot of different things since. Like we have this, right? And Dean, you were saying this, right? Because this is almost like Cruise finding himself, spreading his wings. Everything's rolling in. How about this? Answer the question. He's so big at this point in his life that it's pick a script.
Yeah.
He can call his own shots, especially at Paramount. He can call his own shots.
Well, yeah,
right?
I mean,
he can pick whatever he wants to do. No one can, there's no worry. So especially if you're Paramount. I mean, he basically wrote the checks for Paramount.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, I'm completely envious. He went from being married to what is it? Mimi. Oh shoot.
Mimi Driver.
No, not Mimi Driver. She was the mother in Austin Powers. I'm trying to remember. Mimi Rogers.
Mimi Rogers. Yeah, that's right.
He was married to her, divorced her, married Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was trading up all the
Yeah.
time. And being a 20-year-old man, in my 20s back then, I was like, yeah, go for it. I mean, he was, in a lot of ways, living the dream of the 80s and 90s, which was, success for the sake of success.
Do you think that Nicole made him get into some of the artsy stuff? Because that's when you started to get into like the Eyes Wide Shut, Magnolia area, Vanilla Sky. You think she made him, or kind of steered him towards a little bit of that? I could see that maybe.
I don't think so. I mean, everything you see about Cruise is, he has people around him that meld themselves to his vision rather than, he might listen to and take input, but I don't think anybody's telling him, calling the shots for him.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I can see that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And I think now, obviously, you start adding another 20 years, in this case, 30 years. So you're looking at a whole bunch of other films, even like Tropic Thunder and stuff. Like you're looking at films that show a dynamic and a performance and a transformation and things like that kind of like, oh yeah, that one's kind of cool. That's pretty cool. And even to be honest, Rock of Ages, well, I don't like it, but I got to give him kudos for it. Holy crap, he brought it, man.
Oh,
he was all in.
He stepped out. I mean, well, was it the war movie that wasn't a war movie, Tropic Thunder, right?
Yeah, Tropic Thunder is the one I was mentioning. Yeah.
Right. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
well,
that Les Grossman scene.
Yeah. Oh my God! The first time I watched that movie, I didn't even. I never made the connection that was Tom Cruise. Right. It wasn't until somebody said, "Yeah, what'd you think of Tom Cruise in that movie?" I was like, "Where was he?" He's like, Les Grossman. And I'm like, all of a sudden, a light went on over my head. Like, how was I that? It showed you to be a character actor.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back to our courtroom drama where we start to get to the big shift. The big shift is that everything is kind of falling apart. They're really getting to they're coming to the point where we don't really have a case. We are really going to fulfill exactly what Kevin Bacon said. But then Markinson shows up. Markinson has been gone the whole time. He's the guy that can come clean, be a witness. They put him under protection, and things are just kind of all over the map. And I think this is where the film starts to really get the wheels going, because then you're kind of on the edge of your seat. Okay, how's this going to play out? Who's going to say what? And how's this going to go? And you kind of, even in my rewatch, even though I know how it goes, I kind of got caught up with that a little bit. Like I was enjoying the journey because the execution was done very well. Troy, did you have a little bit of that? Did you get a little bit of that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the thing you got to really focus on too is, as rough as it is to watch, the editing and the shooting of that scene. Certainly no pun intended. Of him laying out his dress blues, getting dressed, taking out his sidearm, and as you're watching this, you're hearing the letter that he wrote to the kid's mother, right? And any analytical part of your brain looks back and go, after this scene, can look back and go, that letter can be brought into court. But he doesn't say anything in that letter that implicates anyone directly. Mm-hmm. It was very purposely worded, that you can interpret it different ways. And that is very, very clever in a story of this kind, right? And it's also
that's the brilliance of Aaron Sorkin, right? Yeah.
Right. And it's also a red underline of this whole thing where we're looking at chain of command, code, honor, and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. This is him stuck between the rock and the hard place, right? Between what he knows he should do and what he knows he has to do. And where does honor lie?
Well,
yep.
In a lot of ways, that scene takes me back to some of the old dramas about the British military on the frontier. right? Because you'd have an officer make an egregious mistake, right? And you see him walk into his office or his quarters, and someone had left a loaded revolver on his desk, right? And it's like, that was their signal to say the only way that you're going to retain your honor is to use this firearm. And in a lot of ways, every time I watch that scene, it harkens back to those movies for me. It was like, this, he did it to, he did it to, one, preserve his honor, two, preserve the good name of the Marine Corps. But in a lot of ways, when I saw him do that, I was like, you coward, what are you doing?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
It tears at every emotion at the same time, right, Dean?
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, he realized what, how do I put this correctly? There are two people involved in what happened in Cuba that obviously knew right from wrong, and one of them kills themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the film, this is the big pivot point because it comes on the heels of the witness, the dopey one, the Forrest Gump of the two, completely crashing and burning under the cross-examination by Kevin Bacon. And not even in the room, was just told what to do. So go ahead, Troy.
I just wanted to say too that personally, of all the actors in this film, PFC Downey, James Marshall, this is, for me, this is his movie. I'm a huge fan of James Marshall. I wish his life had gone differently because I think he was just on the precipice of some really great roles if his health hadn't failed him. Just want to hold him up for a moment as long as we're talking about him in this film.
Okay. I don't know much about I know he's on Twin Peaks, so you're going to have to fill in some gaps for me. So help me out on...
He had a situation where he had a bad reaction to a drug he was taking, ironically, just for acne. And it gave him a very, very bad intestinal problem to the point that he literally couldn't work. He couldn't. Oh, man. Wow. He couldn't get out. He kind of needed to be near the bathroom,
Yeah, he's
so
sick
he
all
couldn't
the time.
couldn't go to sets. He couldn't, and he was out of work for a long time. Still, he has issues. And it's just, and it was a big law case. I mean, that was one of those big Hollywood cases where there were a lot of people, big names that came in and testified. Because when you're in a case like that, you got to say, look, I'm losing my career over this. And so what is the financial ramifications of that? Well, people were coming in to say, I worked with him, I directed him, I whatever. He was going to be big.
Yeah. And that's a shame because, it takes to, one of the dirty secrets of Hollywood is, these people are looking for the fountain of youth and always doing things to make themselves stay pretty. And,
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that backstory because I wasn't really familiar with it at all. So that's awesome. I'm glad I get to have something else to kind of look at.
Something on my heart that I want to
share.
You're
a Twin Peaks guru, so I mean, I know you love the Twin Peaks. Yeah,
I kind of am.
And again, I'm going to be a noob considerably compared to this guy. There we go. I have a hard time with this StreamYard thing. I need a little boot button that kind of does it or whatever.
Oh, don't feel bad. Like I said, I can't even figure out how to put a picture up for my avatar, so you're fine.
So everything collapses. He shows up drunk. He's been in the rain, and it's all falling apart. Everything is bad. And then we sort of kind of get, just little Hollywood-esque little moments to kind of move the story, the bats in the closet. By the way, there is a great line about don't put what does he say? Don't put the bat in the. What does he say? It's like don't put the bat in the closet or something like that. It's basically the exact same line from Dirty Dancing about don't put baby in the corner. But it's like don't put my bat in the closet. It's the cadence, the pace, the syllables, everything is exactly the same, and it made me laugh today because I don't even know how many people would pick up on that element of geekiness or whatever. But that's where the story kind of we're going to pivot again to the savior scene. So we have a track that you in the audience. You're not quite sure, you kind of know what they're going to do, but you don't know what they're going to do. And then this is where we're going to go. So that's kind of, let's go. Yeah. Okay. So this movie has a rabbit hole when you dig deep into it. Yeah. No, it is. It is a fun movie to revisit because once you've seen it, like I said, it's more about the presentation of it than it is like, some big twist that's spoiled and you can't enjoy them. It's like watching Sixth Sense again. Yeah, so I'm going to do a Sixth Sense review next year. Kind of have a visit. I'm like, how does it actually hold up? Because I've gone a long time without rewatching it. Now I've tried to. My wife loves those movies, but that one I've not wanted to let her watch. I said I need a long time before I watch that one again because I don't. I saw it. Yeah. I
just remember that line. I see dead people everywhere. Mm-hmm. At the time when the movie came out, I was working my way through college as a assistant manager at a bar, and so one of the bartenders towards the end of the night, I'm standing there and I'm just exhausted. I'd been punched 2 or 3 times that night just because people are jerks. And so this bartender comes over to me and she says, I see turds everywhere. And I was like, all right, that's perfect. Great. Great repurposing of a line. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one to revisit because I'm not sure how well, once you know the twists and stuff, how well can you enjoy it again? So I'm trying to give myself a vacation from it to see how it'll hold up. But with this, the performance of it all, the execution of it all was a really fun experience. And then when you because now we're going to be headed towards the big scene, the big confrontation with Jessup. He's met with Kevin Bacon's character to say, listen, man, you got an out because if you go there, I have to get you, man. If you start making this accusation without evidence, if you start doing this, I have to take you down. Like you will be faced a court martial. So, and then of course at the last minute, Demi tries to give him the thing, if you don't think he's going to say it, you don't have to do it. You don't have to. So now the audience is almost like, okay, he's going to say it. How does he say it? It's pretty rare, isn't it, Troy, that Hollywood actually delivers on that element of expectation? It is exceedingly rare in Hollywood's history.
I think that the greatest films always do, but those are few and far between. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of films where there was the build up and you're disappointed and you're like, oh, what they should have done was, but every now and again you get a film like this where it's like, I can't see how they could have improved this.
Home run.
They built up to it. We saw the seed laid. We saw it grow and germinate, and then boom, the payoff. There's even that one scene where he's in the middle of the cross-examination, right? And you hear his inner monologue without even hearing it, right? Where, although it's very unrealistic in a court drama, he doesn't answer the judge for 7 seconds. He should have been held in contempt of court, but it's that dramatic pause. Do I do this? I'm literally putting my career on the line if I do this.
Yep.
And he looks over at her and then he goes for it, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get the payoff. And that speech. Oh, that speech.
So, Dean, that speech was so iconic. And obviously, I think there's been quotes in the chat. Everyone, you can't handle the truth, lives on in our lexicon. Yep. The build up to it, the delivery of it all, the comments of it all, just everything about it transcended everything. So is that even a bigger thing as a Marine, or is it more like it's just a fun, cool Hollywood thing?
how do I put this? I mean, he had as it was great that Nicholson was wearing a Marine uniform, and I've said this to you. You both heard me or saw me type it in chat. I think if at that time in Nicholson's life, he could have played Chesty Puller, no problem. He just evoked that, that image of him, evoked that. I think he looked great. The delivery of that speech, I don't know if I'd say it had to be in a Marine uniform, but it was just that speech of, it's like, hey, I'm the guy that's standing between you and the wolf. I don't ask you to say thank you. I just don't want you to tell me how to fight the wolf. And that was exactly the delivery. I think it was great. And in a lot of ways, it mirrored what I was hearing from my buddies that were still in the military at the time, because that was during Somalia, and we know what happened there when Washington started changing the rules of engagement. And I think that speech was well timed, and and I honestly there are two, again going off on a tangent, but from that time frame there are two speeches and movies that I still remember from that time frame. That speech, and then Crash Davis and Bull Durham talking about romance. And that's those two are honestly, two of my favorite. Not necessarily the same thing, but right up there as enjoyable moments to relive.
Gotcha. I will say, I on the rewatch, I kind of had forgotten that they had to spoon feed the dummies in the audience that still cared whether or not the two witnesses were legit or not. So you had to have the Tom and Kevin thing discussed. They really didn't have a testimony; it was all bluff, and you had to have some of these different elements kind of spoon fed for the Hollywood element, and then of course how things transpired after the fact or whatever. But I will say this though, I'd kind of forgotten about the emotional impact of the ending, and sort of the real twist is, James Marshall's character having more lines than he has in the rest of the movie combined, really, and where he basically just goes like, I don't understand what's happening. Why are we being kicked? We're dishonorably why did this happen? We didn't do anything wrong. I don't understand. Like, that actually hit me in the feels more than I remembered it doing. Like, maybe it's because in the legacy of this is, the Cruz versus Nicholson scene and the speech and the quote, that piece almost like got forgotten in my brain or my lexicon. And I don't know if you guys want to speak to that at all, or Troy, you're nodding, so I guess you kind of agree, but I don't know. I was surprised I felt that. I was like, whoa, I don't remember feeling this before. This is pretty cool.
That whole exchange between the two, kind of sums up the crux of the conflict here, right? It's as a soldier, I have to follow orders. True, but there comes a point where you have to say that is not a proper order. You're giving an order that I cannot follow, and I don't know where that line is, and I'm not sure how many soldiers could say they would know that. But all you have to do is look at Nuremberg.
Well, now you're touching on a point that is near and dear to my heart, right? This is going to be anecdotal in a moment, but what Dawson says, I think I'm getting the name, is that they were there to protect people, and they should have protected Santiago as well.
Yes, right? Yeah, great line.
And so that comes back to, one of the things that, especially in the Marines, right? Mealtime, we had a joke when it comes time to mealtime, you feed the mules, the men, the NCOs, the officers, right? So we don't have mules anymore. So you take care of the men first, then the NCOs, then the officers. What does that mean? You put the welfare of those under your command ahead of yourself. Now, there's going to be a point as a leader when you can't do that. When they give you an order, and it's, the only thing I can say, when I was a fire team leader was, I hope I've instilled enough confidence from these guys that when I stand up and I have to go, that they're there with me. And, and the way you do that is you make sure that if it's like you're out on liberty and one of your guys is drunk, well, hey, you put him in a cab, you get him back home, or you carry him yourself. And it's the same way when you're in the field. And that's why I like Dawson's character, right? What did he do? He was the only one there that actually, the thing you hear throughout the movie is, well, why didn't you do anything to Santiago? Well, because Dawson wouldn't let us, right? At the end of it, he'd been browbeaten by Nicholson and Sutherland's characters so much that he did something that was completely against his character, and it wound up with
destroying
his
life.
Somebody that he had been trying to protect. He went in there and it's like, if I don't beat him up, somebody else is going to do it. And at the end of it, there were 3 victims, and the persons who made them do it are saying there, well, we didn't swing the hammers, no bullshit. And that's where I talk about there are orders you can give and orders you should give. And they shouldn't have given those orders. And
before we get to Che and some last thoughts or whatever on the film, Troy, is it anything you want to say about the film, or kind of give it like your kind of like a wrap up sort of element or a review or thought? Or
I think the best thing I could say is what I wanted to say in response to that. I'd never heard that before. The mules, the men, the NCOs, and the officers. We're in the Christmas season, right? I'm going to be watching one of my favorite Christmas films, White Christmas. Great line from that. They look at the old man and they say, we ate, then he ate. We slept, then he slept. And the whole film is about a bunch of guys who came back from serving together. They look at their commanding officer and they're like, I'll do anything for that guy because he would have done anything for us. And he
Absolutely.
did. And you juxtapose that with what you're seeing in this movie. Yeah. That the real breakdown in the chain of command was going down, not up.
Not up, right? I agree. Dean, any other last thoughts, last review elements, or something like that you want to throw out there real quick?
I think I've covered everything.
Okay. All right. Greedo says thinks he's going to watch it again. I appreciate that, man. Love to hear your thoughts too, and his back in the comments too. We're like on a rewatch. If you had any other thoughts or nuances that kind of pop in your head, because it's always fun to. Again, also to talk about films that are good. Like we got to continue to make sure we throw good things against the wall for folks. You have plenty to feed on. I guarantee I'll get an email, a comment on the video, or a private message about someone who has never seen this. I heard you guys talking about it. I watched it. Wow, you're right. It's so good. Of course it is. We told you it was good. So, Che is of course talking more about like the dive deep of the sort of like the true story that this was sort of like based on those kinds of elements, and the film does have a ton of like nuances of it was rooted. We'll pull up one side of the house for thing stuff that it basically. I don't know anything that kind of jumped out at me. I don't know that I have the in here.
You're breaking up, Pops.
Okay, it is him and not me. Okay,
but I don't see it in. Yeah, that's me. It's so whenever I'm sharing, I'm having the technical issues, and whenever I share a window as it starts playing ads and things.
Oh yeah.
Then it causes me to my little StreamYard thing will start going all wackadoo or whatever. I'm just having a problem. I'm gonna have to call the cable company because we've tried everything now. Even though I have my own computer issues, that's not an issue with the connectability. But I really enjoyed the rewatch.
Have you reformatted your router? Sometimes you need to do that.
Oh yeah, I did that yesterday. I just did everything. I
and do you have an ad
and
blocker?
tried to redo it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to add an ad blocker and stuff like that too. I will say, I don't want to say it didn't hold up as well as I thought it did, but I held it in a higher esteem, and I blame my friend. I have a very close friend, someone I cherish in my life, and this is his favorite movie of all time. And I don't know. I've always teased him about that a little bit. Like, I'm like, really? Come on, of all the movies, this one? And it has a rewatchability for him, I think, is the biggest factor. Like, there is something that doesn't, we don't talk about rewatchability enough in our evaluation of reviewing a movie. As I said, the performances of this film is what drives it more than some of the nuances and details, because obviously we're picking apart some of those little elements tonight. But I don't think we're really picking apart a lot of the performances. The performances are really good. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of young actors, and there's some elements I think really in the first half of the film. But once you get to the courtroom scene in particular, man, this film really finds its legs and really starts running, and really starts to build towards the big Jessup scene, which is basically the iconic scene that everybody knows and quotes and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, check it out, folks. 30 years. Whew.
Mm-hmm.
Hit me hard today. So that was the one thing, you had to make a thumbnail and put, when you have to type in 30 years. And I know when Troy and I were talking about it, like, yeah, 30 years, man. He's like, oh my gosh, you're killing me.
I'll tell you what, Jay, I think Demi Moore still looks great. But what's scarier, Tom Cruise looks even better.
Well, it's funny, because I'm still a huge Demi Moore fan, but again, guys of our age, we grew up watching her in things like, what was it? St. Elmo's Fire and
St. Elmo's Fire. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
about last night.
About last night. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The thing about Cruise is he doesn't look like he's had a lot of work done. He just seems like he's aged well. And you're like, holy crap, man, what on earth is the Scientologist doing?
I was just going to say, do they have some sort of,
they got a secret
bottle
of herbs pacts with extra dimensional creatures or something?
Yeah. But no, Greedo, we're not. Yeah, Greedo's PG-13, man. PG-13 on this channel. It's the PG-13 channel. So. Hey, Pop Bifer, thank you so much for always supporting. Bifer's one of my best supporters out there. Always liking and commenting and stuff like that. I appreciate him very much. So, but no, a great watch, guys. I'm glad we were able to really spend some time really getting into this. I did enjoy it. I really, really did.
It's a good movie for that time frame. I just a part of me still thinks it was Tom Cruise looking for that critical acclaim.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't initially get the impression though from what I've read, and Chase maybe chasing some of the trivia down better than I am. Here's another great comment about Greed. I don't know that it was a vanity project though. I get the impression it's more like just Aaron Sorkin, like it's an Aaron Sorkin thing. It's more of a, I don't want to say a vanity project. It's a pet project for Rob Reiner. It's like, oh crap, we can get Tom Cruise. Yeah. Give Tom Cruise this and let him know he can do this, and then we can get Nicholson. Nicholson got paid. I did look this up. I checked my notes when we were chit chatting. $5 million for 10 days of work.
Man,
that's well, I mean,
it's great work
goat,
if you can get it.
He's the goat.
Oh, it's like try to remember one of God, I'm drawing a blank. Superman's dad from the first movie, Marlon Brando.
Oh yeah. Brando, right?
And there were scenes in some of his movies where they had to shoot him chest up because he's walking out and he's not wearing pants, but he's delivering the lines.
Yeah.
And you just get to that
Jack,
level.
all of the stories about Jack, Offset, what he does the night before, all those kinds of things are hysterical. Just look up Keaton talking about Jack like on set a Batman. Like, and some
I
of these things that
watched-
they did where, yeah, go ahead.
I watched an interview with Matt Damon, and he was talking about Jack Nicholson in what was it, The Departed, was out there, and he was just supposed to shoot someone, and then he just started saying to the director, "Well, yeah, but why don't you have him?" He was just talking about how it went from Jack Nicholson, just shooting a guy, to Jack Nicholson shooting a woman, and then making a comment about, "Wow, she fell kind of funny," and then them chopping her up with an axe. And what was supposed to be 30 seconds on the movie turned into like one of the most pivotal scenes in it.
Wow.
Yeah. He's a very interesting, creative guy, but he's also just an odd, eccentric dude too, and that's where some of these stories come into play. Bifer's asking about my best of. So we're doing sort of, I don't know if I'm going to do a best of video separately, but I know on Talk Hard on the 20th, we're going to have like a best of work of roundtable on Talk Hard, so I'll be able to go into some of my thoughts on some of those films and. Not just films, but also probably some TV stuff and things like that. So we'll be doing a little bit of that. So, but Troy, Friday nights, every Friday night with this guy right there.
Tomorrow night, an hour earlier than usual. It's a special one because we have Emmy Award winning meteorologist Katie Nicolau is going to be a special guest, but she has to get up real early, so we're getting her on an hour early. We're going to be talking about Hurricane Ian, which my co-pilot kind of had to dodge and live through. He's going to share his experience. We're going to hear a little bit about hurricanes and surviving them from Katie, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern, tomorrow on my channel.
That's awesome. Make sure you're checking it out on Fridays, and if you can't, hit the rewatch. And by the way, Che, those are comp, man. Those are not. They're not paid for. Those are free. 100%. And actually, I think there's even a reference to that in the TV show The Offer. No, the Lakers one, Winning Time. It's the docudrama, the recreation of the Lakers back in the day. And then when they started doing the celebrity thing, there's a comment about Jack and not paying. So, this has been documented in different books and things like that. It's not, Jack doesn't pay. These celebrities don't pay. This is one of the reasons it's insane. They don't pay. All right, Dean. Dean, did you enjoy the stream? Did you get a little dose for it? We get you a little.
It was great. I enjoyed myself thoroughly.
Awesome.
It's nice to jaw jack with a couple of guys that are smarter than me. I enjoyed it.
Oh, I don't know about all that, but I can tell you this: it's a good time to talk nerdy stuff. I'm always down with it, man.
Yeah.
Talking with you guys is thinking of all the movies I've watched over the years and which ones, make the top of my list in different categories.
Yeah. And I've talked about it several times. Like I can't stand the what's your favorite movie of all time? Like, my brain doesn't work like that. My brain doesn't deconstruct, the way everything gets organized in your brain, how you evaluate things and genres and actors. Like, because other people, that's how they approach it, because for them they have some other thing that they're into. I liken this to a person at work about sports, because they're like the sports. I call them nerds. I refuse to play whatever terminology they want to play. They're just nerds like us. They're they're sports nerds. They're sports nerds. And it's like trying for you guys when you guys are like, LeBron versus Jordans, and you have these conversations, just like the nerdy stuff. It's you guys. It's your nerd stuff. You're nerds just like us. It's just different. That's all. And usually it honks them off a little bit, but then they also kind of do respect. So that's all.
My best friend gives me trash about collecting comic books, and I said, dude, you've got the entire roster for the Detroit Red Wings during the 1960s in trading card form.
Trading cards, right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
how is that different?
Yeah. I'm like, you and I would be at the same damn trade shows. Yeah.
Back in the day, we were. Because I'm the amalgam of sports cards and comic books. And so I said, this is my comic shop. That's how I viewed Pops. But back in the day, they had everything under one roof. There'd be movies, and there'd be statues, and there'd be gaming. There'd be D&D. it wasn't like now where it's all so specialized. Back then it was all, I could go into Merlin's and I could go into Green Shift. I could go into these places in the 80s and 90s here in the greater Tampa Bay area. And that's what it was. It was pretty rare. The ones that were usually very specific, like there was one called Comics King, which was basically like a distributor of what was called New England Comics, which is like the publishers of like Tick and stuff like that.
Oh, I love it.
They didn't last that long. And they were way more expensive. They just had comics. Part of the problem was you guys could have paid your rent better if you had had some of this other stuff in there, right? So, yeah.
The Tick is funny because I love it. And it was how I introduced one of my nephews to comic books, right?
Very good idea.
He was like, I don't like comic books. And I said, do you like to laugh? And he was like, what do you mean? So I give him, the Tick #1, right? And you open it up, and there's the Tick in a straitjacket going, board.
Yeah. Oh, the show.
And you immediately start
I love the
laughing.
show.
Oh,
yeah.
gosh.
Well, folks, I hope you had a good time. I hope many of you watch this again. Love your comments. Love your feedback. Love your suggestions. We're headed into a new year. So I'm already trying to plug and play different things in the calendar. I'm trying to carve out enough time to maybe do a quick little 5-minute video or something to pay tribute to 2 or 3 films that I didn't really pay tribute to in this year, because it is impossible as a creator to juggle as much content as what rolls around in my head, especially because I've kind of gone full time, but full focused on this after doing so many other things that were kind of, splitting my time. So, but hopefully everybody's doing well. Look forward to checking out this Friday stream, because obviously I'm a Florida boy and hurricanes are very topical for me, of course. So it'd be great to hear what she has to say. I tell you, it's been awesome to have Dean join us as well and bring expertise. And guys, nothing else, in case we don't talk or chat or whatever, Merry Christmas to both of you. Merry Christmas to you guys in chat. Thanks so much for all you're doing. Thanks for being with us. Make tomorrow better than today. Be blessed out there. And remember, talk hard. And also remember, we learned from the best around here. Learn to chill. Learn to relax. Enjoy life a little bit. Here's a good example.
I'm Ross. All I do is chill. My life is a thrill. For real, Bob Ross. I be too calm for the drama. You don't want to cause a problem. I'll solve it, Bob Ross.